Musk versus Trump. We all thought it would happen, and then it seemed like maybe it wouldn't, but now it's here. It's the passive aggressive spat of the year. Let's break it down. Ukraine ain't done yet. Joni Ernst said a dumb thing, and then she said it again. Could we have a real race in Iowa now? And we'll be joined by the lead of the Dropkick Murphys to talk about the return of protest music. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
All right, Jason. Well, breaking news is that the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which is the office in Congress that scores legislation to say, hey, what is this thing going to do? It put out its final estimate of the GOP spending bill. And what we know is that it will decrease revenue by $3.7 trillion over 10 years. It will decrease spending by $1.3 trillion over that same period of time. And if you're somewhat decent at math at home, you could probably put that together to say that our debt is going to increase by $2.4 trillion over 10 years. Meanwhile, what do we get for that $2.4 trillion in increased debt spending deficit? Well, our uninsured population is going to go up by $10.9 million. Those spending cuts come mostly from Medicaid, $344 billion over 10 years, food stamps, $295 billion, and the Affordable Care Act at $132 billion. So we somehow are adding to the deficit and doing so on the backs of people, low-income people and people who need health care. So that's where we are right now.
What a deal, Robbie. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, who could pass up such a deal? Sometimes they do stuff where we have to be careful not to overthink our criticism. I can remember, several years ago, as you know, I did a year as a paid CNN commentator. And I remember one of my very first CNN hits. I came on and I was up against some Republican guy or counterpart, a commentator, and it was Trump's first healthcare bill. And he talked for a really long time talking about how great it was. And then Brooke Baldwin is like, Jason, what do you think? And I said, it's a healthcare bill that takes healthcare away from people. Seems like a bad idea. And then it was just quiet because they weren't used to people just not talking for a long time. But the point of the story is sometimes you don't have to say very much about something. Sometimes all you have to say is this bill explodes the debt and takes healthcare away from people. It's a bad idea.
I do want to get into some of the internal Senate politics because they only have 3 votes to spare. But before we get there, Elon Musk has entered the chat here. While you were away last week, Jason, I played the video of Musk criticizing the bill and basically saying he was done getting involved in politics or Republican politics for now. He has been tweeting about this bill. And here are a couple of these tweets. I'm sorry, but I can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. And then he followed up with, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. What say you on this, Jason?
I want to do two separate things. Let's take the I don't really like Elon Musk at all version, and let's just go after it. And then let's do a version where we sort of give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Because either way, Trump loses, in my opinion. So, neither of us are Elon Musk fans. Elon Musk discovered about a year ago that his place in government might be, cutting spending, right? Because what he knew was he wanted Trump to be president because he was going to pick one or the other. And I think it was a self-interested move. And he spent a gazillion dollars making it happen. And then it became clear, like, oh, I guess the way they view me, I could have a place in this world by cutting spending. And then that became his whole personality. And so as a result, now he looks at this and it's going to explode the deficit or the debt. And he's going, oh, well, this is terrible. And so he's discovered this personality and now he must defend it. And I find that annoying. Now let's go to from Elon Musk's point of view. I find it annoying because all the stuff he did is stupid, and Doge didn't, for the most part, really help anybody. It only really hurt a lot of people, and in fact, it was going to cost a lot of people around the world through USAID and things like that their lives. So that's all disgusting. Now let's pretend we're an Elon Musk fan, and let's look at it from his point of view. He just stepped away from his businesses. We're giving him best case scenario benefit of the doubt. He stepped away from his business empire to give his time, and he created all of these, mostly made up, but we're going to pretend they're real, cuts and efficiencies, and then they're completely undoing it in one bill. So, if you give him the benefit of the doubt, way more than. I mean, it would make
best
you mad.
He saved, and if you use his numbers, I think it's something like $174 billion. If we just take the numbers he gave us, this adds $2.4 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. So it is demoralizing. I think I tend to take the view that, I wouldn't use the term came at it honestly, because that definitely presumes too much. I think Musk is a true believer in government efficiency. He happened to go about it in a very disingenuous way, and he also smuggled a bunch of other ideological and self-interested moves along with that. And so you got to think this guy who's like actually spending all this time, I think genuinely believing that he's doing something good, now turns around and says, all these people have betrayed me that I spent all this time investing in. And there's a sneaky little move. His NASA administrator was axed at the same time. So there's some kind of criminology going on here.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, and I think you nailed it when you said he takes it personally, because I would amend it away from he's a true believer in government efficiency to what is that term, the nobody's more passionate than the recently converted or whatever, whatever that, idiom is. And, back when he was making it his entire business model to get subsidies for his various businesses from the government, I wouldn't view him at that time as a proponent of government efficiency. But when it became his whole personality, he became converted to the cause, which makes him a very passionate believer in it, sort of. But your point is a good one, that he takes it personally because it's now wrapped up in it. The old Colin Powellism, which is never let your ego get so close to your argument that when your argument falls, your ego falls with it. I mean, now anything that doesn't look like government efficiency to him looks like a personal attack upon him, to him.
Right. Well, somebody who was trying very hard to keep it impersonal was Mike Johnson. And I'll let you decide, Jason, whether he stayed on the right side of the line here.
Until we get this thing over the line, this is the most amount of money that any government has ever saved on planet Earth in a piece of legislation. Ever. It's a very important first start. Elon is missing it, okay? And it's not personal. I know that the EV mandate, very important to him, that is going away because the government should not be subsidizing these things as part of the Green New Deal. And I know that has an effect on his business, and I lament that. We talked about the ramp down period on that and how that should be duly considered by Congress, but for him to come out and pan the whole bill is to me just very disappointing, very surprising in light of the conversation I had with him yesterday.
Okay, so here's what's going on. Mom and Dad are fighting, but Mom got the house, and we'd like to stay in the house. And Mom is Trump, and I would bet you our ad revenue for this week that press conference was preceded by a conversation with President Trump probably within an hour prior to it, where the message was pretty well received by Johnson that Musk is not our friend at the moment, because he's trying to be friendly, but he's also trying to introduce the idea that this is self-dealing by Elon Musk, when they have been telling us for the past 5 months that Elon Musk is the greatest patriot ever, who set everything aside to come in and doesn't care about how it affects him or his businesses. And now all of a sudden, even though Musk hasn't even mentioned it, all of a sudden the fact that the EV mandate is in there was dropped into the conversation, which was, I believe, an absolute, because Mike Johnson doesn't have the stones to do that on his own unless he thinks he has cover.
The question I have is, at what point, if at all, does this escalate? So right now, Musk
soon, I hope. I can't wait.
Well, Musk is, that's where I'm getting at.
I know.
And for people following, right now what's going on is Musk is not criticizing Trump by name, at least as of this recording. Trump is not criticizing Musk by name.
It's a proxy battle. It's
a proxy battle. I was actually surprised that Johnson went where he went, because if I were in his shoes and I was totally self-interested, I would not even have brought up the electric vehicle thing, because I think that is an escalation in my opinion, and he's inviting scrutiny from a guy who has tweeted that he's going to get involved in GOP primaries. I'm not sure you want that if you're Mike Johnson in a year where you're already projected to have a hard time keeping the House. Now, the biggest piece of theater to give us any sense of what this relationship between Musk and Trump was this Oval Office meeting last week, in which the two behaved themselves relatively well.
Before we go to this, can I say the error I think Mike Johnson is making? He's counting on the idea that when he has to pick between these two, that if he picks Trump in this proxy battle, that's good because Trump is obviously more powerful, and that Trump will have his back. And that last part is the problem, is that you are having to choose where to put your allegiance among two people who have demonstrated zero capacity for loyalty over the long term. And that means Mike Johnson is, as any speaker with this small of a margin, particularly in this GOP, is screwed. Because in 3 weeks, the fact that Johnson did this for Trump ain't going to matter when Johnson does something else that Trump isn't going to like, or when Musk spends money on something that Trump wants him to. And so it's just a terrible spot to be in.
Yeah, well, the other things going on with Musk was that his week, the week in which he was exiting the White House officially, coincided with a report in the New York Times that detailed extensive drug use, meaning carrying around a pill box, having all kinds of issues that we don't need to describe here are, related to his overuse of ketamine and other drugs. And that this was all going on while he's one of the biggest government defense contractors and the head of DOGE, and should prompt all kinds of questions, some of which came up in this Oval Office meeting.
Before we show the clip, I want to preview it. Here's what I want people to listen to here. This is the art of not even bait and switch. It's just filibuster. So just listen to how Musk avoids answering this question, and listen to the tone of his voice to get a sense for how nervous he is about this question and how eager he is to never answer this question.
The president mentioned that you had to deal with all the slings and arrows during your time at DOGE. There's this.
Well, some of the people, some of the media organizations in this room were the slingers.
Well, so there is a New York Times report today that accuses you of blurring the line between.
Is the New York Times, is that the same publication that got a Pulitzer Prize for false reporting on the Russiagate? Is it the same organization?
I got to check my Pulitzer.
I think it is. It is. I think the judge just ruled against the New York Times for their lies about the Russiagate hoax, and that they might have to give back that Pulitzer Prize. That New York Times. Let's move on.
Okay, then next question. Trump. I got one for President Trump. So President Trump.
He also has a black eye, Jason.
Yeah.
In this meeting.
The
Things don't appear to be going well with Mr. Musk.
Something is going on there, and did it really happen, or is it just in my mind? Has Mike Myers played him already on SNL?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can only see a Mike Myers parody now when I watch him,
Right.
and so because it's so cringy the way he handles the media, and that's that particular. By the way,
that was Steve Doocy, wasn't it?
He was lashing out against the Fox News correspondent. And did not even you could tell he went into that press conference petrified of being asked that question, to the point where Doocy didn't even get to ask the question. He just knew what question was coming, and he made it clear, I won't be answering that question.
I almost think you should frame the question like, hey man, I see your black eye. I read this reporting in the New York Times. You've talked about some of the stuff that's in the New York Times. The New York Times included photos of your pillbox from people who are close to you. Are you okay?
Yeah.
It's the question I was like, are you all right, man?
What's his claim? His claim is his son punched him, and that's where the black eye came from.
Thing is,
Okay.
any one of these things, this is like the Nazi salute, right? Because like I know a lot of people are talking about how Cory Booker did the Nazi salute, and like how I heard Tim Miller saying, well, this is why we shouldn't like have all these hysterical reactions. And I normally like agree with Miller on some of the stuff, but I'm like, the difference between Cory Booker and Elon Musk is Cory Booker has not had to apologize for being anti-Semitic in the past, for making very straightforward anti-Semitic comments about the quote-unquote Jews and their role in society.
Also, if Cory Booker thought he did it by accident, he'd be like, I'm sorry, oops. And Elon Musk was like, I'm going to do it now. That's now my thing. I'm going to do it over and over. So big difference. Also, like, we should spend a moment here talking about the fact that the guy who was in charge of making policy decisions about things like completely eliminating foreign aid, really had a huge amount to do with eliminating the refugee program, because that was really started as a Doge thing. All the USAID stuff, all the there was I shared it on Instagram, a great clip of David Brooks talking about the hundreds of thousands of human lives that will be lost because of the Doge cuts.
I think he says already lost. And
he
was projecting
already lost. That's right. Yeah, and that's just the HIV aid. That the guy who made those decisions was not just appears to have been spiraling from drug use and needs to be in rehab. And the guy in that clip we just played looks like a guy who needs an intervention. He looks like he's in crisis and sounds like it. And that's a big ass deal.
Yeah. What you get in that New York Times piece also is a sense that everybody around him, people who have been close to him, are alarmed and say that no matter what you thought of the Elon Musk 5 years ago, the guy you see today is different. And that's why I think you had so many sources. And there's a lot of details there that probably don't have any bearing on his like ability to do Doge or whatever, or be a defense contractor, but just have to do with his character, which is like stuff around his many children and wives and how he treats them, that you would imagine a party like the Republican Party that has a lot to say about people's
or used to.
Choice, or used to. Well, it still kind of does. This is the same party that was trolling Glenn Greenwald, who I'm no fan of, but who I think was unfairly attacked over the course of the past week by right-wing media because they found a sex tape that he had with a male prostitute. This is the same party, same people who are somehow looking the other way when Elon Musk is having children with multiple women, ignoring them, also ignoring his own children, and also like appears to be a drug addict.
That's the thing, Ravi, is.
And has had a sexual assault allegations against him, by the way. Those things we forget.
The people who are saying he's not the same guy he was several years ago, the thing that also happened a few years ago is he decided to change what he cares about politically. His behavior became very erratic. Like, I mean, we've both, I'm sure, known people who struggled with addiction and who were untreated and who became very different and made choices that were harmful to them and to the people around them, and distanced themselves from the people who had traditionally, shared their values and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, I'm genuinely worried that there's a guy who's incredibly close to power and has wielded a lot of power recently in the world, let alone in the United States, who is in the throes of addiction. Like, that's a problem. They felt like it was really bad that Hunter had access to his dad. Like, Hunter wasn't in charge of like 50% of the things happening during that's right. What this is, man.
Right. Well, just wrapping up the sort of conversation around the spending bill. I mentioned that the Senate, this bill is now in the Senate, and they have about 3 votes to spare, and there are kind of 2 different camps here. There's the fiscal, and you can use like air quotes here, but fiscal conservatives in Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, who are saying that they oppose the bill because it doesn't have enough spending cuts and it doesn't do enough to address the budget deficit. So those are like the Muskites, right? Then you have this other group of people, including Josh Hawley, who says that the Medicaid cuts go too far. Susan Collins, who's concerned about the impact on rural hospitals. Tom Tillis, who wants a slower phase out of clean energy tax credits, Jim Lankford and Steve Daines, who want the tax cuts to be permanent, right? And so if you're putting this together, some of these desires are in conflict with each other, right? So like if you're restoring funding, then it's actually going to make the deficit situation worse, which presumably could piss off Senator Rand Paul and Ron Johnson and maybe people like Ted Budd even more. And so this is, I think, a true conundrum. And I actually think this is one of those areas where like you can combine your cynicism about the GOP and whether they're ever going to actually stand up for anything and against Trump with a genuine, fresh look at what it is they're saying. Because I'm going to read you what Josh Hawley, who we're no fan of on this podcast, has said he wants to do to address his concerns, which again, his stated concerns are that the Medicaid cuts go too far. What he says, he's floated 3 possible ways to cover a shortfall. Number 1, a higher top individual income tax rate. 2, higher taxes on fund managers' carried interest. And 3, caps on what the government pays for prescription drugs. Now, those, depending on the details, are 3 progressive policies, as is defending Medicaid. So I think like if you're going after Josh Hawley here, if that's even how you're spending your energy on this particular piece of legislation, I wouldn't go after him for what he's saying. I would go after him for his record of caving, because what he's saying, I think most people in this audience would probably want him to accomplish.
100%. It is a good example of these people are not leaders. They are people who follow their voters instead of leading their voters. Josh Hawley, as we've talked about, you know the guy personally much better than I ever have. I met him once, even though he's, I guess, my senator, weird to say, but like, for those who are new to the show, you went to law school with him. What we know is he's a very intelligent guy. And Josh Hawley looks at the history in his state and says, oh, there was a governor 20 years ago who decided to balance the state budget by cutting Medicaid and then wasn't able to run for re-election even because he was so unpopular. He understands that the thing you can do as anybody, Republican or Democrat, in a state like Missouri that will give you the fastest track to unpopularity is anything that will get rural hospitals closed. And why do Medicaid cuts get rural hospitals closed? We've talked about this in the past on this show. It is because Medicaid dollars pay for a lot of the care that happens in rural hospitals. And if you don't have those dollars and you still have to provide the care, which legally you do, you have what's called uncompensated care you can't pay for, and your hospital ends up going out of business and having to close. And that's really, really bad, and people die as a result, which is why you see people like Susan Collins having a problem with this, people like Tom Tillis, people who have large rural populations in their state, regardless of their party, see this as a problem. Now, Hawley, to your point, has 3 ideas there that are progressive ideas because he's following what has become more of a Republican voter base, which is white working class or working class voters, mostly for Republicans, white working class. And they have a lot more, let's just say it, a lot more people who don't have much money than they used to have. Their voting base used to come from the suburbs. It used to come from more affluent people. And now more of it comes from working class folks, and they can't turn on that. So yes, I think the most important thing is to say, okay, you're saying that. Will you hold to it? Are you just going to like let the bill pass and be one of the 2 senators who gets it passed and doesn't have to vote for it? What are you going to do? Are you actually going to hold the floor and try and get an income or try and get an increased tax on the top income levels put in? Like, will you actually do that? If you will, like, even I'll say good job. But I don't think he will because he's a smarmy dude. That's what I think.
Well, on that note, before we go to a break, if you haven't yet and you're watching this, subscribe to Majority 54 wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. You can just search Majority 54, hit that follow or subscribe button. And if you are a longtime listener or you just love what you're hearing, leave a review, 5 stars, and say what it is you love about the podcast. When we get back, we're going to talk about more tariff chaos. We're going to talk about this incredible Ukraine mission that happened over the weekend, and then a call between Putin and Trump that just happened right before we started recording. And then we will talk about Senator Joni Ernst and her unconventional approach to politics when we get back. When we relaunched this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setups, filming schedules, logos. It was super overwhelming. And every day it seemed like we had a new decision that needed a new answer. And when you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. The Midas Touch Network is proud to have their own store using the Shopify platform. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style, accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Now get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. You can easily create email and social media campaigns whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing, returns, and beyond. Turn your business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/majority. Go to shopify.com/majority, shopify.com/majority.
Summer is full of big moments, weddings, vacations, and endless photos. But if you're dealing with hair thinning or shedding, showing up and being present in those moments might feel tough. Nutrafol takes a whole body approach to hair growth, working from the inside out. So the sooner you start, the sooner you'll be feeling confident and focusing on what matters most to you. You may have heard of Nutrafol's hair growth supplements and wondered, do they actually work? It's a fair question. Many hair supplements overpromise and underdeliver, but Nutrafol is different. As the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, it's trusted by over 1.5 million people and is clinically tested to deliver real results in just 3 to 6 months. Thinning hair is different for men and women, so a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men and women that are tailored to different life stages, such as postpartum or menopause, and lifestyle factors, such as a plant-based lifestyle, so you can get just what you need. Plus, users of Nutrafol Men reported no impact to sexual performance. Building a hair growth routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed. Enjoy free shipping, automated deliveries, and up to 20% savings with a Nutrafol subscription. Plus, get free naturopathic doctor consults and a Headspace meditation membership. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code MAJORITY. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY.
All right. Well, we doubled our U.S. tariff and U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs, and these are now 50% instead of 25%. There has been this long-running Wall Street sort of acronym for Trump. They call him Taco Trump. I don't know if you've heard this, like Trump always chickens out, which I think it's funny, but it worries me a little bit for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think people forget that we have a 10% baseline tariff now on the rest of the world, which I think people thought was by far the wildest scenario that could have happened under Trump. And people are somehow just accepting that that's like a win for us. And 30% on China before we start to include all these subcategories like these steel tariffs. So though Trump has chickened out on some of these tariffs, he has kept in place pretty significant tariffs at a time when the Federal Reserve has a 2% inflation target. So if you're doing that math, you're saying, well, 10 to 30% increase on prices of anything that involves tariffs. And let's be charitable and say companies are going to be wily and get to half of that. We're in real trouble. And companies have said this. Target, Walmart, et cetera, have all come out and said they're going to be raising their prices. And so we are at this point right now where I think everybody who's commenting on this, for the most part, I think is a little glib, whether you're somebody who opposes the tariffs or support them. I think a lot of people feel like the worst is behind us, where I very much believe we're about to get a economic tsunami from these tariffs.
Yeah, because the effects of them
It takes time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes it's a ripple. It takes time for the wave to reach the beach, and by the time the wave reaches the beach, there's going to be massive additional waves coming behind it that can't be stopped.
Yeah. And here's this Treasury Secretary. He was asked about this when he went on the morning shows.
So Walmart, there was just a piece published with the conservative strategist Karl Rove. I'm not asking about politics because he is a political strategist, but he went in on the math here. And he points out that Walmart has a profit margin of less than 3%. He says, if it does what Mr. Trump says, eat the tariffs, it can't break even. It can't absorb the cost of imported pair of kids' jeans with a 46% tariff on Vietnam, a 37% tariff for Bangladesh, or 32% tariff on sneakers from Indonesia. Other companies are in the same pickle. So should companies cut back on the amount of goods they have on their shelves or just on their profitability?
That's a decision company by company, Margaret. And I had a long discussion with Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart, and they're going to do what's right for them.
But for consumers, the reality is there will either be less inventory or things at higher prices or both.
Mark, when we were here in March, you said there was going to be big inflation. There hasn't been any inflation. Actually, the inflation numbers are the best in 4 years. So why don't we stop trying to say this could happen and wait and see what does happen?
Well, I hope he comes back on when those numbers actually, because literally she's laying out to him, hey, we're about to see the inflation. The companies that Americans shop at most are saying they're about to raise their prices. And he's like, well, let's wait and see till we get that inflation. And this gets to what I was saying before. Which
she's also like, would you rather be shot or stabbed? And he's like,
right.
Everybody has to make that choice for
Well,
themselves.
he said nothing. He
Right,
was like,
exactly.
well, they have to make their own decisions. Now, here's what's going on in the MAGA world. They correctly have pointed out that a lot of people felt like this would be, and I think reason would have suggested that if a president proposed the kinds of things that Trump has proposed, that we would have way more market turmoil ahead of the true economic indicators about consumer sentiment, spending, inflation, et cetera. That has not happened. So what's gone on is they're optimistic now, and they've got their chests out like, look at us. And Trump's poll numbers have rebounded somewhat. And there's this chart going around from Real Clear Politics. I don't know if you've seen it, that shows George W. Bush and Obama. It excludes Biden, interestingly, but says that, okay, tracks second term presidents, which is probably why Biden isn't there, but and shows the approval rating in the second term month by month, and shows that Trump started off worse than George W. Bush and Obama, but at this very moment is a tick ahead of where Obama was, because Obama started dipping around this time in his second term. So they're like, oh, the economy, like the stock market is doing fine. Trump is quote unquote getting more popular. And they're like, okay, keep rolling. Same as it ever was. This is what they wanted. This is their narrative.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're pot committed on this stuff at this point, right? Like there are members, particularly in the Senate, who have tried to talk the Trump administration out of the tariffs, and it's not working. And the only thing that they're getting in response is the ire of the Trump administration. So I think that most of them are in this position where they're sort of like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. I mean, that's where they've been with Trump for the whole time, and they're doing it all over again.
Right. And the OECD put out a report essentially saying, look, we are going to have a global economic slowdown, and it's going to be even more pronounced in the U.S., even if Trump rolls back most of his policies, because the uncertainty has already done damage here. There was a piece in The Atlantic by Derek Thompson that I'll quote from here that I think just gets to how chaotic this truly has been. And I'll read from this. It says, in the past 4 months, President Trump has announced tariffs on Canada, paused tariffs on Canada, restarted tariffs on Canada, ruled out tariffs on certain Canadian goods, and then ruled in and even raised tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. And that's just for starters. On April 2nd, so-called Liberation Day, Trump announced a broader set of tariffs on almost every country in the world. Soon after the plan was half suspended, then Trump announced a new set of elevated tariffs on China, from which he backtracked as well. Next, the courts, as often happens, took over the job of erasing the president's previously announced policies. Last week, a trade court struck down the president's entire Liberation Day tariff regime as unconstitutional, only for a federal circuit court to reinstate the tariff shortly thereafter. Now, a higher court has the opportunity to do the funniest thing. undo the undoing of the tariffs, which have been in a permanent state of being undone ever since they were created. Got all that? No, you most certainly do not, and neither does anybody else.
So the thing about all this is that we have to go back to what is the stated purpose of this. We have to remember that the stated purpose of all this is that Trump believes, and seems to have actually believed for a really long time, even back when he was a Democrat, that a trade deficit is some horrible, embarrassing thing for the country. And that if we are selling more stuff, or we're buying more stuff from another country than they're selling from us, then that is somehow some form of national shame, right? That's at the heart of this, is Trump just believes that. And so he's forced a lot of the other people who have their fortunes wed to him politically to believe that, or to say they believe it. But at the heart of that is a policy that seeks to, and they say this all the time, make stuff here again. You know, there was a exchange the other day, Midas Touch put out a clip of it, of Senator Kennedy and Lutnick, who I think is the trade rep now, going back and forth about, what if Vietnam said, we're going to go to zero on all our tariffs? Would you go to zero? Him saying, absolutely not, because we still buy more of their stuff than they still sell to us, or than we sell to them. And Kennedy is like, what are you talking about? What's the point of this then? And what he keeps saying is, because there are things we want to make here again. And at some point, we've got to ask the question, do we? Like,
Right.
Politicians on both sides of the aisle have been assuming, including me when I was a politician at times, assuming this, just assuming that Americans were dying to make a lot of stuff here again. And I think perhaps we have overestimated how badly Americans want to work in factories and want to work in manufacturing.
We're kicking out the people who do work in the very few factories, and whether it's factory farming, actual factories, and agriculture. You know, most of the hard labor in this country, huge percentages of undocumented immigrants who are going to get kicked out of this country. So we're about to lose the very few we have right now. Look around and ask yourself, who around you is going to assemble an iPhone? You tell me.
There's a great Dave Chappelle bit where he's like, you know what?
I want to wear the Nikes. I don't want to make them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't want them to cost $9,000.
Now, actually, in a related, so this Ukraine mission over the weekend is somewhat related to this, and I'll get to the connection between the supply chain and this drone question. But this mission over the weekend was unbelievable. Ukraine hid drones across Russia before attacking airfields in 5 regions, stretching across 5 time zones, causing $7 billion worth of damage, which doesn't really get to what really made this special, is that they took out these bombers that are incredibly hard to make, apparently, and that were like the bombers that were wreaking havoc all across Ukraine. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of that footage, Jason, but it's pretty riveting stuff.
Yeah. So these are high range, or high altitude, long range bombers, right? Basically, these are the bombers that can fly over anywhere, but including Ukraine, at an altitude high enough that it's very difficult to take them down with air defenses, and they can just drop bombs pretty much at will over Ukraine. And it appears that Ukrainian special forces have been working at this for a year and a half, and that they use these trucks, who I'm not sure who was in the trucks. I'm not sure if it was Ukrainian nationals or if it's assets within Russia, but they staged the trucks at these locations not far from these bases. And then I think it appears, according to Zelensky, the individuals who pulled this off were then extracted prior to the operation and pulled either back to Ukraine or faded back into wherever they are, sort of in their like sleeper cell within Russia. And then the drones were remotely launched from the trucks. And the reason that has to be done, obviously, is because what is a drone in this case? It's basically a floating bomb that's remote controlled. And, you know, obviously, if you try and take one from Russia or from Ukraine to like far Siberia, it's going to get spotted. It's going to get shot down well before it ever gets to these bombers.
It would lose battery.
It's not a long range drone like the long range bombers, right? So they have to. I mean, this is like in naval terms, this is why you have submarines, so you can park off people's coasts and launch stuff at them. That's basically what they did, but with drones. pretty incredible operation that involved, I would assume, a lot of human assets that were recruited along the way by the Ukrainian special forces and their intelligence services.
I mean, unquestionable huge win for Ukraine ahead of their peace talks, if we want to call them that, with Russia. I'll come back around to like a dark cloud here on this whole question, but and this is a different dark cloud, but Trump spoke to Putin just before we recorded, and among other things, Trump truthed the following. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he'll have to respond to the recent attacks. But he said this is what Trump tweets. He says, okay, Putin's going to retaliate strongly, like as if he's like a neutral observer, Trump.
Right.
And then he called it a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to peace. He did not say that he discouraged Putin from retaliating, and the White House wouldn't say that otherwise. Suspicious and weird. Yeah, I mean, it's just more evidence that this guy's totally captured. Even people like Ben Shapiro are starting to criticize him over this.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not at all surprising, right? I mean, from Trump's point of view, Trump is clearly rooting for Russia in this deal, blames Ukraine with no even, not little evidence, like no real logic behind it, just blames Ukraine. And then, yeah, I mean, like, from his point of view, he's like, well, it's a war. Obviously, I'm not going to discourage him from responding. But it almost, that post almost reads like, isn't it cool that I got to know about this before you? Which is odd.
I don't want to sound hyperbolic here, but at this point, what's stopping Vladimir Putin from using a nuclear weapon?
No, that's the concern, right? Like, well, what always stops someone from using a nuclear weapon? Nuclear deterrence. Do we feel, right? I mean, Putin has floated that in the past because Putin has done the trial thing to try to figure out, will there be, promised nuclear deterrence? It certainly wouldn't come from the United States. We know that. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I haven't read up in a long time on what a tactical nuke is, but like there's this middle ground of something really horrific as well.
It's just a low yield nuke that can be deployed on the battlefield by battlefield commanders. So it's still really, really awful and will kill hundreds of thousands of people. And that is what he kind of alluded toward the beginning of the war about the possibility of deploying that sort of thing.
Well, before we get to, you're our ambassador to the Midwest. So before we get to this Joni Ernst situation, there's one less fun aspect of this. Not that the nuclear part is fun either, but Noah Smith, the economist, wrote a great piece in his Substack about how this should prompt us to ask a lot of questions about our own safety in this country. We are absolutely prone to the same kind of attack. And this gets to the China question, right? And this is again where just because Trump is anti-China as a country, I mean, obviously not the people, doesn't mean you should reflexively be pro-China and not take seriously that this is a huge threat to this country. And China right now manufactures basically all of the drones in some way in this world. A huge percentage of them are manufactured in some way in China, and nearly nothing is manufactured here. There are these Pentagon drones that Noah Smith does a good job of caricaturing that are like a complete mess. They a couple years ago, you could probably visualize them, that they're kind of like these big, cool looking drones, but they're easy to shoot down and they're very expensive to make. They take forever. And what Noah Smith wrote was that every component essentially of a drone, injection molded plastic parts, computer chips, the electric motor made of rare earth, permanent magnets, the lithium ion battery, all this stuff is made in China. And actually under the Trump administration, these things are harder to make in the US, in part because of the Inflation Reduction Act, pulling back the Inflation Reduction Act. So we are now, we have all these battleships and aircraft carriers and bombers and all, like we have the biggest, most expensive military in the world. And I think what we just witnessed is a flattening of this capability. and where our enemies, including China, who really holds the cards on this technology, could wipe out a lot of our military infrastructure really fast with stuff already in our country right now. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah, what's interesting about it and scary about it is that, in the 20 years of the war on terror, what we learned was that as a conventional large, fighting force, one of our biggest vulnerabilities was going up against an asymmetrical small force, right? Which comes up with ways to do things like improvised explosive devices and that sort of thing. We refer to it as asymmetrical warfare. This is a situation, but we always had the confidence that in a force on force conventional fight, we could take anybody in the world. But this is scary because it says, well, actually, in a force on force conventional fight, there may be an asymmetrical element to it, like drone warfare, where we would not have the advantage. And then now you've got that same sort of vulnerability we had to ISIS and Al Qaeda and the Taliban that we could potentially have to, the Chinese military, which is a great point.
Well, Jason, we're going to be talking to some potential candidates and some announced candidates in this Iowa Senate race against Joni Ernst, a state that, Democrats used to win. Obama carried Iowa, I think, twice. What's going on here with Joni Ernst? Walk us through this.
I don't know. Let's watch this video of her being asked about Medicaid cuts at a town hall. Let's start with that.
So when we're talking about the corrections in this reconciliation bill, again, it's corrections of overpayments and people that have not been eligible for these programs by law as it is currently written. So when you are arguing about illegals that are receiving Medicaid benefits, 1.4 million, 1.4, they are not eligible. So they will be coming off. So people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks. Okay. No, but what you don't want to do is listen to me when I say that we are going to focus on those that are most vulnerable. Those that meet the eligibility requirements for Medicaid, we will protect. We will protect them. Okay.
So before we go into how she handled this gaffe in a second, let's also talk about the fact that what she's saying is just not true.
Right.
I mean, she's claiming, it's only going to be people who aren't supposed to be receiving Medicaid who will get cut from Medicaid if we pass this. Well, if that's the case, why do you need a new law?
Right.
Why do you need a new law if all you would have to do is enforce the current law?
Well, it's also, there's a ton of reporting on this. Jonathan Chait had a great article about this, that the primary mechanism of savings, and this comes from the experience of states that have implemented work requirements, come from the fact that people who are on Medicaid, who are busy people who are at the bottom of the income ladder, have a hard time keeping up with the constant stream of paperwork, where in some cases you have to prove every month that you're employed. And so what winds up happening is they fall out of compliance with everybody who's dealt with government paperwork knows it's always a problem. And that eligible people who are working eligible people in this country, including tons of citizens, will fall off of Medicaid, even though they're eligible and they are working, because they can't keep up with the paperwork. That's how we save a ton of this money on Medicaid.
Yeah. And when you talk to people about this, what I would say is, remember when they said it was only going to be the criminals and the gang members who were deported?
Right.
Just let us do this. And we promise. Well, they're saying, no, it'll only be the people who shouldn't receive Medicaid.
Right.
And so
circular.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
She had an opportunity to clarify her remarks and apologize. And she sort of apologized, Jason. Let's take a look.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
So if you're just listening, you don't realize what you know. If you watch the video, she's in a cemetery as she's saying this. This reminded me, Ravi, of something from 15 years ago that some people may remember. Let's see if people can spot this or you know, recognize it. Jeremy, can you go ahead and play that clip I sent you?
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you.
Delaware, right? This is the Delaware
None of us are
Senate?
perfect, but none of us can be happy with
Delaware.
what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending,
that's good.
trading favors, and
So that was Christine O'Donnell running for the Senate in 2010. There was a rumor that she was a witch, so she cut a video where she was dressed in all black with like what appeared to be a cauldron behind her, saying, "I'm not a witch." And
Actually, her video is better than this one.
It is. It's
It's
got
actually,
better
in some
music.
ways,
It's got music.
It's funny in some ways because the subject is so much less important. Like the idea that she's a witch, who cares? Like you could frame that as cool in a kind of way. I know her story was a little off on top of that. There's so many problems with this video. Number one, it's like anytime anybody tries to do like a Trump impersonation, they fall flat. You know, like you know, it's like trying to be mean, trying to troll your people, especially when you're Joni Ernst and you ran on this, like, I'm a sweet Iowa kind of like, you know, whatever. Like her message was always that she elevated herself in her races. This was not her tone. Two is that her joke about the tooth fairy is like, it's weird because the tooth fairy doesn't exist, but she's saying everybody does die. So there's like, it doesn't like, I don't even understand the connection between those two things.
How about like, it just sounds kind of odd to talk about the tooth fairy and then invoke Jesus. I mean, it just it kind of makes it feel like she's not serious about her faith either.
Because you're saying like if you want to be rescued from this idea that you are going to die someday, then embrace my faith. And I'm like, well, then why did you say everybody's going to die?
It's a really odd.
A lot of problems with it. And her creepy demeanor. I mean, it's the whole like earnest, like looking like you're about to apologize. I mean, I don't know. I know that we're not the target audience for this, but I'm like, who is? You know?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you don't have to be serious all the time, but there are things you don't get to joke about.
No, or joke, be funny.
Right.
Like at least be funny.
Or
if
at
you're
least
gonna
be
joke about
funny.
it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't even know. I mean, the way to handle that is she probably didn't honestly even need to apologize. Like she should as a human, but politically, she could have just been like, no, like she could have ignored the statement she made and said, I stand by what I said about Medicaid, like, and just say it's not going to lead to people dying because, you know, whatever, which is BS, but that'd be better than like acting like, well, it's no big deal because, you know, she's on health insurance that she gets for her job, which is an elected official. So, anyway, but yes, in the coming weeks, we will have multiple Democrats vying to run against her in Iowa, and who I know both are friends of ours, and both of them are buoyed by how dumb she has sounded recently. All right, with that, we are going to bring in Ken Casey. Ken is the one of the founders and the longtime frontman of Dropkick Murphys, the punk band, and you know them from Shipping Up to Boston, I think, and maybe I got that wrong. I'm not from Boston. I don't know. Sorry, Ken. But Ken's coming in because Ken, tell us what you're working on. You have, I think, a new song that is part of this June 6th Veterans March. Tell me what's going on.
Sure. Hi guys, how you doing? Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, we see you and hear you. You look and sound great.
I can't see you. So yeah, we'll be playing on June 6th in DC on the National Mall as part of this Unite for Veterans protest. And coincidentally, we have an album coming out on July 4th, and the first single came out yesterday. And the first single has been, it's been, I guess, it's right in line with a lot of the sentiments that we've always written about. Just, workers' rights and human rights, and just the balance of, wealth and, not treating working class people fairly. But I don't know, something about the times we live in makes what we sing about seem all that more poignant in the moment, So yeah, we're just happy to be able to show up and, put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and support the veterans who are not being treated as they should. And we've always had the backs of veterans, but it's time to really show up and be there at their side.
So you were referred to us for this segment by our friend Ken Harbaugh. And one of the things Ken Harbaugh said is that this song is sort of a protest anthem for this age, which I think is very cool. It feels to me like, we haven't really had much of that. Like growing up, we had, I was born in the 80s, so was Ravi. And so like, there were all these great protest anthems that at that point were 10, 15, 20 years old. And then there were a few that were attempted sort of in the 90s. But I mean, do you feel like this is a bit of a genre that needs to come back?
Well, I mean, from my growing up, as a punk rock kid, all the bands that I listened to growing up, there's a lot of bands singing about Reagan and, and then bands singing about Bush and the punk road. I'm a little taken back by, in the time where our voices really matter, a lot of people aren't speaking up. And I don't think it's because they necessarily agree with what's going on, but they're just trying to keep their head down and stay out of the line of fire of like the trolls and all that. And that's never been our thing. We've always been wanted to be like in the mix. It's why we started the band. But I would have maybe given a band a pass in the first 4 years of Trump if they wanted to mind their own business, maybe. But now it's like silence is complicit, in my opinion. So one of the things that we feel it's important to do is, if we're as loud as can be, maybe some of the other bands that we're, and I'm not talking about like Bruce Springsteen and Green Day, like those, God bless all of them for doing what they do, but they'll be all right regardless, right? So there's a lot of bands that I think that are like in our realm of, working musicians who have a great following, but I think there's a lot of bands that are afraid if they lose half their audience, well, then that kind of puts them out of work. And I just feel like if we all speak up together, then, it kind of takes the power away,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming to talk about it. So just by way of promoting the event, I think I've got it right. So it's June 6th, which is, the D-Day anniversary. It's going to be on the mall in Washington, D.C., 2 to 5 p.m. It's on the National Mall. It's spearheaded by Unite for Veterans with support from the United Veterans Council with the AFL-CIO and other organizations. I guess, obviously, y'all are performing. What is the new song so that people know where to go find it?
Yeah, it's called Who'll Stand With Us, and it's the first single off the album For the People that'll come out on July 4th. And we just released a video for it, which is, eerily very timely in terms of the subject matter and the way the video shot. So yeah, you could check that out on YouTube. Hopefully people get some inspiration to keep fighting on,
Well, Ken, thanks very much for coming on and for talking about it. And thanks for speaking up. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Ravi, what's new in your world before we wrap up?
Well, I'm just been back in New York and just resisting the temptation to go travel anywhere. I'm trying to spend the summer here, which is nice. Just bought some new plants across the street. The I have a request for the audience, which is I'm finishing this nonfiction book I'm writing about how I take like a different passion or skill every year, and I've been profiling people as part of the chapters I'm writing. Your wife is one of them. There's another woman in our audience who gave me an incredible story of how she had lupus and had to quit her job and stay home, and so she started painting, and so I profile her in one of the chapters. Shout out to Amy. And so I'm writing a couple of additional chapters that I don't have profiles for yet. So if any of the following applies to you, reach out to me. You can DM me probably on Instagram at Ravi M. Gupta, or go to ravimgupta.com, and there's like a contact sheet there, which is an even better way because I am much better at keeping up with my email than my DMs. But couple of things. One is something I call a skill batical, which is if you've ever like had your kids leave for college and then you took on a big new hobby, or you got laid off from your job and got severance. Maybe some of you federal workers are doing this right now. And you took on something really big, like a new hobby, because it's not like the kind of hobby you like would do in normal life, but it's like something that some major life change and like surge of time or money allowed you to do. In my cases, it was surfing during the pandemic. Then that's one. Two is like a sustainable sport. So if you like somebody who played basketball and then you subbed it out for tennis, like I did, or whatever, like you picked up a sport that to you, like you basically had to get rid of something. Maybe you're a figure skater or a gymnast and you started something else. That's one. And then the third is what I call a mental marathon. So playing chess. In my cases, I took the MCAT 1 year and taught myself biochemistry. Some people do computer programming, like something that like is the equivalent of like a mental marathon, something like really challenging that helps you build your cognitive capacity late in life. If any of those three things apply to you, reach out to me. You can go to ravimgupta.com or at ravimgupta. Bonus points if you set some kind of yearly goal and had a yearly process around what you do. It doesn't have to be that, but it really helps if you have some kind of story where you're like, okay, by the end of this year, I want to do X, Y, and Z, or something resembling a year. So reach out if any of that applies to you.
And what I will say also is that you want to be in this book if you can. If you have any interest in being a part of what I think could end up being a bit of a cultural movement, I think this book is going to be a very big deal. So
yeah, man, I've actually picked. The book is going to come out in the fall of 2026, and I've been like just racking my brain about what I want to do with the year that comes. And I finally decided. It's pretty exciting. I'm not ready to announce it here because I haven't told my publisher yet, but it's going to take me on the road for a big chunk of the next year to some fun places. And I'm hoping that'll be the next book beyond that too.
Well, when we stop streaming in a minute, you got to tell me what it is. So that's pretty great. The thing that happened in something happened this week that got me thinking about like.
Well, you guys went to Disney World, didn't you?
We went to Disney World, and that was awesome. And it was exhausting and awesome. But there was something that happened the other day after we got back, which is Drew played in a baseball tournament, and he was having a great tournament, and then he got hurt, and he's fine. He got like liquid stitches on his hand, but he bled a lot, and he handled it really well at first, but at one point, he's 11 years old, and it was the first time he had ever like been injured in a way where it was really alarming, and he hyperventilated a little, and I had to talk to him to calm him down. And it made me remember when I was around his age, I got cut on my hand, and I remember my hands were covered in blood, and I'd never seen that before, and I was hysterical about it. And I was just thinking, like, the first time when you're a kid that you get injured in a way that's like where you see the inside of you come out of you in a way that's more than just like a little bit of blood. It is a truly visceral experience that you never forget, but it also informs the rest of your life, because if you get hurt again, like I think it definitely does inure you to be more calm about it. So I'm just wondering, like, do you remember the first time you ever got hurt that way as a kid? I bet everybody listening does.
I don't like. I never got. Well, actually, I have stitches, but I was too young to remember. I have like the thing here, but it happened when I was really young, and then when I was older, I got stitches on the other side of my head. But I didn't have like anything like that, and I could remember. I mean, obviously I had cuts and stuff, but I don't remember the first one.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just an interesting thought I had. I've been, as my kids are 4 and 11, they're soon to be 5 and 12, and so like I'm watching them go through these different phases of childhood, and I've now watched a couple of phases, and it definitely makes me reflect on like moments from my own life and just like remembering what it's like when things happen for the first time, and how it informs the rest of your life. It's just interesting. But if, fortunately, he's okay. After about a week of not being able to use that hand, he'll be back at it because he's a spongy little guy. But anyway, it made for kind of a scary moment at first. But all right, thanks everybody for listening. A reminder: The Game Within on the Valor Media Network is our other show, which is focused on sort of the intersection of sports and politics. It streams live at 2:30 Central Time on Mondays. Or is it now 1:30? It's 2:30 Central Time on Mondays. Drops on audio on Monday evenings. We've been really enjoying doing it, and you've probably seen some of the clips on our social, and we think it's pretty good. So thanks very much. You can find me at Jason Kander everywhere. You can find Ravi at Ravi M. Gupta everywhere. Please leave, as Ravi mentioned earlier, a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this or wherever you tend to listen to or watch podcasts. Thank you to the Midas Mighty, and remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.